Well, hey everybody, I'm so excited that you found your way into the group. I think these next few weeks may provide some of the very best discussions and opportunities to learn from each other that maybe we've likely ever had in a message-based group. We are jumping into a new stretch of teaching that we're calling I Want a New Family. And maybe some of you have felt that way before, or you're feeling that way right now. What you're currently experiencing is not what you had in mind. And the only solution, it seems, even if we might be joking, is just to start over. You wish you could walk away or maybe run away and get a redo. Or maybe it's a little less severe for you, but you just know that things can be better with a few reminders and some tweaks, some adjustments. You could be a better mom or a better dad. You could be a better son or daughter. And while we're specifically dealing with a family dynamic in the series, quite a bit of this will be directed to parents, yes, but I do believe that there's something here for everyone. And that includes your stage of life. That you may have a brand new baby, you may be in the preteen phase, you may have teens or college students, or you hit the promised land like we have and are empty nesters. I also think there's something for you if you're someone who wants to be a parent someday, or you are a grandparent, or you work in our kids or student ministry. I think there's even something for those of us who don't fit any of these descriptions, but there's a role for us to play as part of the larger family of God. So here in the first week, we're starting with a very simple foundation, a starting point for our conversation that everything else can build upon. Now, before we jump in, when it comes to talking about family in the Bible, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, family instructions are very basic. Things like husbands, love your wives, wives, respect your husband, kids, obey your parents, and everything's going to be great. Two, family instructions are given in the context of spiritual parallels, meaning when we read about husbands and wives, we generally also read about Jesus and the church. And then this last thing is that family gets redefined to be more than just mom and dad and kids. It gets expanded throughout the scriptures to a group of individuals who have come together, united around our love for a common Father, God. In other words, the followers of Jesus become the family of Jesus. Now, with all of that, we're starting in the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. And you're going to read this together. Specifically, we're talking about Deuteronomy chapters 5 and 6. And you're likely familiar with what is happening here, and you may not know it. But in Deuteronomy chapter 5, Moses has just revealed the 10 commandments to the nation of Israel. And while there were a whole lot more than 10, these were the really big ones that God wanted them to live by. That if you were to do these things and live this way, meaning if you fear the Lord or love and respect God, and if you were to pass them on to your kids, not only would your family be different, but the next generation and the one after that would be too. So you come to chapter 6, starting in verse 4, a very famous passage called the Shema. And that's just the Hebrew word that begins this passage. Jews would recite this section every day, most likely 3 times. Jesus would have done this in the morning, somewhere around noon, and then later at night. As you get into the discussion, there are basically 2 challenges Moses has laid on the table here. They can easily break down to this. Number 1, he says, love God, and number 2, lead your family. That's his whole instruction. Love God and lead your family. Challenge number 1 is to love God. And Moses says to love him with everything you have, like with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your strength. And isn't it interesting that before we start talking about how to raise better kids and maybe navigate discipline and how to give responsibility and all the things that we think come with creating a new family, isn't it interesting that the very first thing that we should work on is our own love for God? So if you're a mom or a dad or a grandparent, or maybe just an adult who lives next door to a family, or you work in our kids or student ministry, your very best contribution to the next generation will come from thinking maybe less about being a parent of a child and thinking more about being a child of God the Father. Now, what Moses says is, as you're loving God with everything you have something, or I would say the most important thing, to pass on to your children. Number two, you can lead your family. And I love kind of the tagline we put with the series that you don't have to leave your family. Instead, you can do what Moses says and lead your family. And as intimidating as that sounds, and as scary as it might be for some of us, God has actually designed you as a mom or a dad to be the primary spiritual leader for your family. It doesn't mean that you have to know all of the Bible answers. It doesn't mean that you have to have elaborate devotions and be a world-class prayer. What Moses outlines is that there are some natural rhythms in life, or just in a regular day, that you should be looking for opportunities to talk about God. And I think you could have a really great conversation around what Moses says in those verses 6 through 9, as you maybe share some best practices for habits and rhythms of what it looks like to teach our family to love God. So if your reaction right now is, I don't know how to do that, then maybe just learn from the people around you in the circle. And if you can at least say, I want to learn how to do that, those are the kinds of things that we're going to discover in the next few weeks. Because while there are some practical things that we can even begin working on this week, most of this is foundation for what we'll take in the future to give you the family that you desire. In the weeks ahead, we'll drill down on more action. As we jump into this conversation, I just want to tell you that it's very possible for you to have the family that you want or that you've maybe dreamed of. And all it really takes from the very beginning is a desire and a commitment. And it starts with you. To love God with everything you have, and you'll be best equipped to lead your family to do the same.